parents wanted to trade houses with me because mine is better, then after refused to give them money they stole it. I'm going to start this off by saying that if you have a house and don't have cameras, get cameras. I have some now, but I should have gotten them sooner. I live in a pretty typical manufactured home in Arizona. My parents also live in one just a few streets over. Despite how close we are, I'm VLC because they are just bad people. They treated me okay as a kid, but things changed as soon as I was in my late teens. I was expected to do more and pay my way as soon as I finished high school. That was fair. I was an adult by then after all. But my parents wanted a lot more in rent than what I'd have to pay to get my own apartment. I'd have had next to nothing left of my monthly paycheck if I'd given them what they wanted. So I refused to give them more than a fair amount, plus a share in utilities. And I started buying my own food as well. My father openly said this was not good enough, and my parents actually filed official paperwork to evict me when I refused to cater to their demands. I left home and got an apartment with my best friend. 5 years later and I bought my own house in a neighborhood not far from my parents. It's just a manufactured home on a small property, but it was so damn cheap that I couldn't turn it down. And my monthly mortgage isn't bad either. I even moved my best friend in to help me cover the bills. We were already used to living in the same space, and the house gave us much more room. I may even let another friend move in to get some more rent money for the mortgage because we've got one room that's actually left unused right now since the house is a 3-bedroom. My parents though somehow didn't like my independence from them. Did they want me to fail or something? I don't know. But the incident that caused the VLC was when they demanded I trade houses with them. Yes, you read that correctly. They actually wanted to trade. Their manufactured home is smaller and older than mine, and has one less bedroom. And their yard is smaller too. Not that either of us have any grass. It is Arizona after all. When they first saw my place, they looked pissed. After a couple more visits my father actually said it wasn't fair that I was doing better than them, and I was rubbing my nicer house in their faces. It's just an old manufactured home in one of the hottest states in the US. Seriously, what's to brag about? But I guess having something even slightly better than what my parents had irked them. And as I've already said, they actually demanded we trade houses because of it. My friend who lives with me literally fell onto the couch laughing when they said that, and I couldn't help but join in. My father said it was not funny, and to give him what he wants. When I recovered my composure, I said he and my mother were not entitled to my house, or anything I own for that matter, and then told them to get the fuck out. After that we barely spoke, and then the pandemic hit. Didn't really change my life much. I liked the peace and quiet, and my friend knows to leave me alone most of the time. My father however got laid off, and he struggled to find another job. He ended up working in the local Mardo Walls for half a year before getting a better paying job. I did get a kick out of seeing him there when I was shopping for groceries. But as much as I hate him, I'm not gonna call him a bad employee. He actually did fine. But during that time he and my mother kept calling me and asking for money. And I know what y'all are thinking. Don't lend them anything. They didn't want loans. They wanted handouts. Why? Because they raised me and I owed them. I said if they didn't want the cost of raising a kid, they shouldn't have had one. A few weeks ago though my mother called me begging for money because their dinosaur of a window AC unit finally crapped out. I told them I was not giving them anything, and they were too cheap to replace that old AC unit for a long time. So I wasn't gonna buy them a new one. My mother then complained about how I have two in my house, and the least I could do is give them one. I then said that maybe if she and my father weren't always pissing away their money on beer and MJ all the time, they'd have the money to buy another AC. Then I said I wasn't giving them one of mine or any money. End of story. Only it wasn't the end of the story. A few days later I came home from work to find my house had been broken into. My front door locks were drilled out, and both of my window AC units were gone. Nothing else was stolen, but they went out of their way to make a huge mess for some stupid reason. Probably to make it look like a typical robbery or something. I knew it had to have been my parents and called the police. I told police that I heavily suspected my parents of the theft because they act entitled to my stuff, even though I'm a grown man that doesn't live with them. I went with police to my parents' house, and sure enough they had both my AC units going in their windows. When confronted my parents, they obviously denied the theft, then claimed they already own the AC units, but statements from their neighbors said otherwise. But my parents still denied the theft. I bought both AC units used online years ago, which means I had no receipts for them. So I figured my only option was to look for witnesses in my own neighborhood. And as luck would have it, a neighbor across the street has security cameras, and the edge of one of them caught just enough to see my parents showing up in my father's truck. My father could be seen walking with a cordless power drill in hand, and a few minutes later they came back to the truck with my AC units, then went back in to ransack the place I'm guessing. With this evidence in hand, police had cause to arrest my parents. At first both of them acted like they'd done nothing wrong, but I convinced police to let me do the talking. I said they could either return the AC units to my home and clean up the mess they made, or I'd let the police arrest them both right there. They'd already stolen from me, lied to police, trespassed, vandalized my house, broke my front door locks, and there was video evidence of what they'd done. If I pressed charges, they were both going to jail for sure. My parents looked deflated, then asked for a moment to talk with each other in their bedroom. I heard a lot of shouting from both of them, and I could hear my mother yelling that my father was an idiot, and he was trying to blame me in turn. After about 5 minutes of that, they came back out looking even more deflated and said they'll return the AC units and stop bothering me for money if I didn't press charges. I said they were gonna clean up the mess in my house and buy new locks for my front door as well. And then I wanted written apologies from both of them on top of it. They begrudgingly agreed and even got a police escort back to my house. My father was forced to put the AC units back in my windows, and then left my mother to clean up the huge mess they made while he went out and bought replacement locks for my front door. He was gone about an hour and came back with a new stainless steel lock set to replace the knob and deadbolt. Then he had to help my mother finish cleaning. During this time I let the two cops just sit and watch them while drinking soda. They said it was very entertaining. After everything was cleaned up, I gave my parents each a piece of paper and a pencil, then told them to write out apologies to me for what they'd done. My father looked especially pissed and said I was treating him like a child. I said he was acting like one, and never stopped treating me as a child either. This was just me holding him accountable, and I could have sent him to jail, but I felt like this was better for teaching him a lesson. He then kind of snorted and started writing. My mother wrote out a good apology, but my father's was pretty half-assed and passive-aggressive. But I didn't care. It seemed to kill him a little inside to have to do it. And when he was done, he left without speaking to me. My mother said she was sorry, and she'd leave me alone, then followed after him. The two cops said they thought the whole thing was hilarious, and then thanked me for giving them an excuse to take a break while on the job before leaving. Not long after, I shelled out to get some cameras for the exterior of my house, so if someone tries to break in again, I'll get it on video. I only have 2 cameras, but added a couple more fake ones that look real enough just to scare people off. I haven't heard a peep from my parents, but their next door neighbor told me they went and bought a new AC unit. Guess they had the money for one after all. Makes me wonder how high they were when they thought it was a good idea to steal from me. Maybe having lean pockets for a while will teach them. Then again, they are who they are after all. Edit. I've been questioned on how I got a house when I was only 23 years old. To start off with, the place was really cheap. In Arizona you can find old manufactured homes on tiny properties for a very doable amount. I also kept and still have pretty good credit. The house and land were only $55K. The house was a little bit of a fixer-upper too, but I was able to put $10K on a down payment, and I was able to get approved for a loan for the rest. The house is no prize, and by now it's at least 30 years old. But it's home, and once I have it paid off, I'll feel much more financially secure. Now story 2. Teacher cuts my insulin pump thinking it was headphones to prove a point. This happened when I was in middle school, back in the days of wired headphones, so about 2011 or something. I've, 24M currently, been a type 1 diabetic since I was about 4 years old, and I use a continuous glucose monitor and an insulin pump. I had an IEP, so all my teachers were told about it and that I would need my insulin pump in class, that it might make noise and I might have to pull it out of my pocket and mess with it if I needed insulin, or I might need to drink a juice pouch, and I was able to do so at my discretion. We had one teacher who was a complete hard SS for no reason. She was notorious for making kids cry during presentations. She even told one girl who wanted to be a doctor to find a cure for cancer, because her little sister had childhood cancer, that she would need to actually be smart to do that, while chuckling to herself. Let a kid dream, man. We were like 12 years old. As you can imagine, she was also at war with technology. And on a side note, these days I use my phone to check my glucose and give myself an insulin bolus. I can't imagine being a kid today and dealing with a teacher like that when the lines are blurred and your smartphone actually is a life-saving medical device. But anyway, if you're not familiar with insulin pumps, the kind I use has a little tube that connects the pump which has the insulin to my body which needs the insulin. This teacher also liked to be weirdly obtuse about things. Instead of being like other teachers and simply saying something like, "No cell phones in class," put it on my desk, which would allow me to remind them it's an insulin pump, and they'd usually say something like, "That's right, my bad." She would instead try and talk abstractly about what she wanted to happen while walking around the room. So this particular day she kept alluding to students listening to music in class, that you should be careful what you do because she can see it, that us kids think we're so sneaky but the adults know what we're up to. I obviously wasn't listening to music, so I figured she'd seen someone with headphones in the room, and the next thing I know she had snuck up behind me with scissors. It took me a good moment to realize what exactly had happened because I was astonished. I was used to teachers thinking I had a cell phone, or getting upset about my pump beeping during an exam, but no one had ever touched it before, much less cut my life-sustaining tube. I was actually sitting with my mouth agape and she turned to me, now that she was at the front of the class again, and said something along the lines of, "Mr. Wonderelli, care to share what tunes are more important than listening to class?" I'd at this point put together that she thought I was listening to music. She thought she cut my headphone wires. I replied, "Just the sound of my thoughts while I've still got any," since that was my insulin pump. She had to let me go to my locker to get my cell phone to call my mom to bring me a new infusion set, My parents insisted no cell phones until high school, but my mom was also scared with me being T1D and too dyslexic to remember a phone number and wanted me to easily be able to call her, so she got me a $15 Walmart phone and put minutes on it. And now I feel old. Then I just waited in the front office for her. She worked from home and drove like a bat out of HLL. She was so angry. I don't ever want to see her that angry again in my life. It took 10 years off of me and I wasn't even in trouble. The teacher had apologies to me and all the teachers got some more disability accommodation training or something. Kinda anticlimactic end, but a friend thought it was entertaining and that I should share. Edit: I'm going to put some of my comments here so no one has to dig if you want more information. Yes, she knew I had a pump. I had an IAP and my teachers were given the information they needed to know about my diabetes. Even still, a lot of non-diabetics just don't get it, or they forget. It would happen a lot and teachers would ask for my phone if they saw me messing with it under the desk. Really, I was going through a thing and embarrassed about being diabetic, so I would often try and hide it, so I get how they thought I had a phone. But a simple reminder it's a pump was enough for every other teacher. Yes, she did get really close to me. I was facing the front of the room to look at the projector screen and to take notes. She snuck up behind me from the back of the room where she was lecturing at us from and reached her arm down towards me with the scissors. I didn't notice her doing that. Kids used to keep their iPod or whatever in their pocket and then run their headphones up under their shirt. It sometimes left a little bit of the wire peeking out from their pocket to get to their shirt. That's where she cut. The pump was down at my waist. In terms of her apology, it wasn't too bad. We had a meeting with her, the principal, assistant principal and a lady from the special education office, plus me and my parents. She said she was sorry for her actions and that she shouldn't have treated me that way and she hopes I don't grow up to expect people to act like that towards me. She forgot I had a pump, but I didn't feel like she was making an excuse. She was saying she should have been more mindful and it was her fault and that I did nothing wrong. She also said I was brave and calm in the face of adversity. Stuff like that. And then she apologized to my mom and dad for frightening them and for any costs. She offered to pay for it, but they declined. They wanted all the teachers to get more education about kids with diabetes and the school had like a nurse diabetes educator or someone come in to talk to the teachers. No, my parents didn't sue her or the school. No, she wasn't fired. Yes, I still had to be in her class. And yes, I did have extra supplies kept in the nurse's office. But I also just really wanted my mom in that moment because I was a kid. This was a tiny school and did a lot of backwards things. They mishandled my learning disability as well. And one year one of my teachers was surprised my dad has mild cerebral palsy and thought it must be so tough for me having to deal with that and would talk to him like he was 5 during student-teacher conferences. He's an engineer. Edit 2: when my mom showed up I was sitting in the office waiting for her. I think it took her like 15 minutes to get their post-phone call. She asked me if I was okay and checked out the damage that was done. I could tell she was mad. Not with me obviously. She walked straight up to the receptionist and just asked where the teacher was and they phoned the classroom and had my teacher come to the office. The principal also came out. My mom ripped her a new one, but she didn't yell, though I honestly think that made it more terrifying that she was very collected. I don't remember word for word, but basically she said that removing my insulin pump was a violation of my IEP, not to mention that it is a medical device and an extension of my body which is keeping me alive, and that she would have the audacity to damage life-saving medical equipment was reckless and criminal. That type 1 diabetes is no joke and takes lives. That she should count herself lucky she didn't damage the pump itself and she let her know how expensive they are and everything they had to do to get me one. She's had years of practice having to argue to take food into places they don't let you take outside food, or in the airport that I can't take my pump through scanners, etc. She was very practiced at putting the fear of God into people but in a way that they can't turn it on her and say she's being disruptive. Then she took me home for the rest of that day.